Welcome to Drafting Out Loud, where today we look at some of Peter Overzet's rules that he released on last week's stream. We'll leave a link to the stream in the description. He had four different rules to look at. We're going to go over all four rules one by one, talk about what you're accomplishing with each one of those rules, talk about maybe what you're missing out on, if anything, with each one of those rules. And then later on, we're going to try to draft some drafts, both following these rules and breaking all these rules and see what happens. Now, definitely not here to trash any of these rules. He's a better drafter than me. He's got more experience drafting than me, so not trashing any of these. But I think it's interesting to look at these and see why do they work, or maybe when they don't work. And maybe you clicked on the video because I put his name in the title as well. But let's look at the first rule. The first rule is 3 quarterbacks by round 13. Now, why is this one of the rules? This is one of the rules because recently, with running simulations, you'll see that 3 quarterbacks seem to get more advancement into the playoffs than 2 quarterbacks. So a safer build when you get 3 quarterbacks. It's as simple as that. Now, what are maybe some of the downsides, if any, to 3 quarterbacks? And I can kind of think of two things. One, when you draft 3 quarterbacks by round 13, you are potentially missing out on other exciting players. Now, maybe round 9 to 13 or 10 to 13 is where a lot of the quarterbacks go. And really, it's around 9 to 13 where a lot of the quarterbacks go. And there are a lot of players in this range that are, either exciting or valuable players for your team outside of the quarterback position. There's a lot of tight ends that are pretty darn solid in here. There's some running backs that have potential solid RB2 profiles, or maybe more exciting profiles. And then you have some pretty explosive wide receivers in this group also. So if you're drafting 3 quarterbacks, then you're probably missing out on 1, 2, or 3 other position players that could benefit your team. Now, the other downside to drafting 3 quarterbacks by 13 is that if everyone's doing it, then it's probably going to become less and less ideal because there's only so many quarterbacks to draft right now. And to get 3 quality quarterbacks, if everyone's got that mindset, all of a sudden those quarterbacks don't go through 13, they go through 12. And they don't go through 12, they go through 11. So the prices of the quarterbacks continue to push up and push up and push up. And then those simulations will eventually say, hey, now you're losing out on too much value in drafting these quarterbacks. You need to start drafting position players. So that's the other thing you want to look at is, are you paying too much in one position when you do 3? Or when or like where in the draft you do 3? Last but not least, if you're always focusing on getting 3 quarterbacks, it makes it hard to draft some of the early round quarterbacks. For example, if you draft Josh Allen in the 3rd round, or if you get Lamar Jackson in the 5th round, Hurts in the 6th round, Burrow in the 6th round, Jane Daniels in the 6th round, it then gets harder to then draft 2 more quarterbacks because you've already spent so much draft capital on that first quarterback. Most likely, if you're always getting 3 quarterbacks, there's a chance that, again, you're missing out on some value and exciting players if you're contributing to something in all rooms where the quarterbacks just go up in price. And you're maybe not varying your builds as much because you're missing out on some of the high-end quarterbacks, which maybe is a way, again, to more likely advance because typically 3 quarterbacks is a better chance. But are you missing out on some high-end outcomes if one of those early round quarterbacks is the one you needed to smash? Now, any quarterback can get a really high score, but I would venture to bet that if you were to put money on just the likelihood of a high outcome, right? Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson are going to have higher ceilings or higher outcomes on average than some of the lower quarterbacks you're getting in rounds 11, especially 12 and 13. Like a Cam Ward, a Bryce Young, Fernando Mendoza, a Daniel Jones, let's see who else we got, CJ Stroud. Those types of quarterbacks seem to be, I mean, they could have a high score again, but their ceiling does seem to be Sam Darnold. Overall, their ceiling does seem to be a little bit more capped. Like they're probably not going to be getting 40 points as often as someone like Josh Allen, which is fine in the regular season. But when you get the playoffs, maybe you need that 40-point outburst by Josh Allen to get you to the next round. So you're missing out on some upside as well. So definitely some benefits, better chance to get to the playoffs, but some downsides as well. Construction, um, excitement, and high score potential. The next one here was two running backs through four, but never Kyron. The never Kyron part, you know, you can take that however you want. Maybe just means not some of the riskier profiles in that range that are dead zoney or something like that. But let's just talk about the two running backs through four. Similar to the three quarterbacks by 13, I think you're going to get a lot more consistency if you get your two running backs through the first four rounds, because then you're kind of guaranteed to get two running backs that should be getting you points throughout the entire season. The further along you go into the draft, the less likely you have a consistent producer for the entire season. In fact, if you look at round 5, starting off, the first pick in round 5 is TreVeyon Henderson. And there's some debates whether he's going to be a good pick, a bad pick, or a mediocre pick. A lot of people don't think he's the number one starter on the team right now. You have Judkins, who is injured right now. You have Scadaboos, who's injured right now. You have DeAndre Swift, who's been trying to get replaced for the last 2 years at least from Chicago. You have Tootin, who is a fourth-round, second-year running back that only inherited the job because the other guy is no longer there. You have R.J. Harvey, who sounds like he's going to get replaced every week, and you have David Montgomery, who's 30 years old, got traded to a Houston team that has no offensive line. So as you get into this fifth round, their reliability definitely starts to potentially fall off compared to the first four rounds on average. At least that's how people feel about it. And what I think we've started to see is that if you want to more consistently make the finals, be a little safer, you want to guarantee yourself points at all of the starting positions. And guess what? 2 of those are running back, and a third one is a flex position, which could be a third running back. More and more people are even trying to get a running back in the flex these days versus another wide receiver in the flex. And a lot of that, I think, has to do with just how the NFL is shifting a little bit, as well as this kind of goes hand in hand with shifting a little bit, but just how teams that drafted heavy running back last year seem to do a lot better. And now more and more people want to get on that bandwagon and be on the safe side. So that's the benefit, again, to 2 running backs for the first 4 rounds. Just more consistency on your team's scoring, which will ideally bring more consistency to your teams making it to the playoffs. Now, what's, I guess, the downside to 2 running backs through 4 rounds? I think they're the same probably downsides that you've always had potentially if you get 2 running backs through 4 rounds. Number one, traditionally, it's the wide receivers that earn their points due to their ability, while the running backs oftentimes fall into their points due to availability. Not all of them, but that's how it looks. That's maybe the philosophy of a zero RB mindset is you get the stud wide receivers early on and maybe even the stud other positions early on. And then you find the running backs that are undervalued, but are likely or possibly going to fall into a position where they end up being the number one running back and they start scoring, the number one running back on that team. And then they start scoring like maybe a back end number one running back. And if you're drafting running backs early on, then you can't benefit from, number one, as many bullets on the high upside wide receivers that are going to really kind of bring those scores up, especially in a PPR site or maybe even a half PPR site. But number two, even if you get one of those back end running backs that ends up being the starter, so one of the guys from, we'll just say from round 5 on, that ends up being the starter, Well, you're not going to benefit as much from that guy not being the starter if you always have Bijan Robinson and Chase Brown as your number one and two running backs all the time. Now this other guy is more likely to hit a flex and he's competing against other maybe wide receivers or tight ends or whatever for that flex position. And if you drop three running backs through four, then it's even harder for that new running back to hit a spot because these guys at the top are already all number one, top 12 to top 15 running backs or so already. So the upside is more consistency again. The downside is you don't benefit when your guys hit, basically. Next one, draft good players. And I think this one makes a lot of sense. I was looking at my drafts and looking at how many players on, at least on Underdog, it's easy to search through Underdog, how many players I had on teams like the Browns and the Dolphins. And I know someone like Malik Willis is a popular pick by some, and they have high exposure to Malik Willis. I have low exposure to basically every single Dolphin and Brown. I got a little bit, but I definitely don't have a lot, and I'm closer to zero in most cases than I am to overweight on them. I'm not saying it's a good idea. Um, I mean, Pete's kind of saying it's a good idea on here, and I think it makes sense too. But who knows? Maybe those players end up being good. You never know until the end. But it makes sense if you're drafting good players, they're more likely to be on good offense. I think he's almost saying like good offenses when he says good players here. And if you have good offenses or good teams, they're more likely to score points and touchdowns, or where you're gonna, make your money on underdog in general. Last but not least, we have no tight ends through round five. Don't be afraid of four. That means four tight ends. And basically, if we look at the board again, similar to, and maybe the opposite of running back, while you're hitting these running backs heavy in the first couple rounds here, we're saying here to not draft a tight end until round six. And so in general, if you're waiting until round six, you're saying that your first tight end on any draft is going to be Tyler Warren or let's see where he is, or Harold Fannin, basically, or later. You got the Dalton Kincaid here. You have Sam Laporta here, Kyle Pitts here. So that's Tucker Kraft. So that's the beginning of your range in general, if you're making a rule like that. By saying that you're not getting any tight ends through five and don't be afraid of four, you're oftentimes saying that you're going to end up with at least three tight ends. Not, guaranteed, but similar to three quarterbacks, if you look at the simulations, I think in general, you're going to find those simulations say that if you get three tight ends, you're more likely to advance than if you get two tight ends. If you, in a similar way, what I think people find is that if you draft one of the early tight ends, like or exactly, because these are the only ones there are, Trey McBride, Brock Bowers, or where is he? Colston Loveland, right? Somewhere right here. Or Colston Loveland. If you draft one of those tight ends, your team is less likely to make the playoffs unless that tight end really hits. And tight ends seem to be one of the more up and down positions. Now, the good news is if that tight end does hit, it is going to put you well on your way to making the playoffs. If they don't hit at that extreme level that they're being drafted at, then you had to do really well with the rest of your draft to make the playoffs. They're more likely to bury you because oftentimes if you draft one of these early ones, you're only drafting one more, and that other one probably isn't nearly at the same level. And so your team can get buried at that position if you do that. So the benefit is that by not drafting one of these, you draft more quantity in a position where there's more risk. And again, you're more likely to make the playoffs because you went not with the upside, but you went with the consistency. Now, the benefit of getting one of these top end tight ends is number one, like I mentioned, if they do great, they can kind of carry your team to the playoffs. Not that you're guaranteed the playoffs, but you're probably a much better shot. Let's say, for example, you got Colston Loveland here in the fourth round, and he hits. Well, your team the rest of your team doesn't do as much heavy lifting to make the playoffs if he's scoring like a number one wide receiver every single week. Um, the other benefit is that when you get to the playoffs, similar to a quarterback, if you have one of those high-end tight ends, they're more likely to have the high-end scores, and they can separate you from the rest of the teams in the playoffs. If you think about the main best ball mania for underdog, first round of the playoffs is 13 teams, if I'm not mistaken, and then it's 16 teams after that, and then it's everyone in the field. So if you can advance those tight ends through, they can get you one big week, and they can help get you to the next round. Now, he wasn't one of the highest drafted tight ends, but like Kyle Pitts last year had a gigantic week, and every single league that you made to the second round of the playoffs, you probably had at least one Kyle Pitts team you were going up against if you were lucky enough to get a team to the next round. So there you go. What do I think we got here with these four rules? And by the way, it's not like he spent hours coming up with these rules. They were made up on the stream. But I do think they're pretty good rules to follow if you want a really consistent team. What we're going to do is we are going to, over the whatever next period of time here is, we're going to try to get a couple drafts in, and we're going to try to follow these rules and then break all the rules in other drafts and see what we come up with in both of them. That means maybe in one draft, we don't get three QBs by 13. We don't end up with two running backs through four, and we do draft an early tight end or something like that. The draft good players and the Kyron one, I don't know about those. Like maybe we'll follow those. Actually, that's an easy one for the two running backs through four piece. But we'll try to follow these rules, and then we'll try to break all the rules, and then judge the teams and see how we did. And let me know what you like, but what you think about that idea. Let me know what you think the results are going to be, which teams are going to like more, the ones that follow these rules or the ones that don't. And thank you, Peter Overzet, for the idea. See you guys on the next one. Peace.